Hello, and welcome to another episode of From Inside. My name is Lori Roberts, and I am one of the consultants at the Center for Optimum Living. And I am here now with Dr. Benanti, who is our director. And tonight we were planning to talk about resistance.
So, when I think about resistance, and I think about how resistance has manifested itself in my own life, there's always a time when we are in one position and we're called to move into another position. And sometimes there's a force resisting that. Is it the neural pathways that have already been in position that are just habituated? We have habituated ourselves to that functioning and we're resisting the movement in another direction. Is it the kind of resistance where we are standing up with our lives on the line? Or is it the kind of resistance that there's just a little pull in another direction that, we're not quite sure how and where we want to go? We live at a time where we are so pulled in so many directions. We are inundated with information, inundated with deeper and deeper levels of analysis into the microcosm of things. And we can lose sight of the big picture. Who are we? Where do we want to go? What's our life about? What is it I know I need to do, but there's a part of me resisting? And as we've talked about when we did the write-up on this, that, there are some things we need to turn toward, face, and go at with all our might. And there are other things we need to turn to and find in that resistance what we're being called to do, and to literally befriend that resistance. Now, in order to befriend the resistance, I need to be a lot stronger than the resistance. It's the force of resistance that's coming at me. And so at the Center for Optimum Living, the Center for Optimum Living is what is within each one of us. We have within us a center from which we can optimize our lives, a center from which we can put our lives into a better balance, resisting what we need to and want to, and not resisting what is really calling forth from us something that's in our best interest.
I think of other kinds of resistance, along the lines of the things that we do create for ourselves that can be useful. If we viewing resistance as something that's negative, it can be off-putting and intimidating. And that's, I think, why the resistance sometimes feels even stronger than maybe if you're looking at it from an objective perspective, it's not as bad. So I'm thinking right now, my kids and I are, they were just in the process of getting all of their own checking accounts and kind of getting all of that squared away. And now we're talking about budgets and things like that. And it brought me back to the time in my life when I was just learning how to manage my own finances, and the idea of a budget, sounded like something really intimidating when I heard the adults in my life talking about it sound like something really severe. And what I recognize now is, a budget is a form of resistance, but it's the healthy form of resistance. As Kevin just referred to friction, what if there were absolutely no limits whatsoever? Mm-hmm. And that's why a budget is a healthy, kind of form of friction, of resistance. Mm-hmm. And so even the resistance that we have inside of us, like say, for example, there's a phone call that I want to make. And I know I've put it on my list and my agenda, the things I want to do today, but this phone call in particular, I really don't want to make. Maybe it's a more difficult person I'm a little intimidated by, or maybe it's just someone that I know is going to talk for a really long time and I have a hard time myself getting out of that kind of situation so I can move on with the rest of my day. So a lot of the times we'll experience even those minor types of resistance where we have, it'll be the thing that I put at the top of my list, but is it the thing that I get to, or is it the thing that I keep putting off? And that was where procrastination came in last time. But in speaking to, turning toward the resistance itself, resistance again, knowing that things like budgets and other things that we could put in place, healthy boundaries are forms of resistance. Mm-hmm. So what could we do with this situation where it's something that we really, really don't want to face? Mm-hmm. And I know I'm using a very small example, but where could we take this kind of resistance and start to look at it as something that could be useful? And I'm sorry, my phone is, I hope that didn't come up on the computer. If you could hear that sound. Speaking of resistance, it's someone trying to reach me. But where could we take, where could we help ourselves to move toward it and view even the one that feels uncomfortable, even though it's that one that we've kind of marked in place as the bad tasting medicine I don't want to take, or whatever, however we want to describe it. Mm-hmm. How can we, instead of viewing it as something that we don't want, to actually teach ourselves, train ourselves to lean into it?
Yes.
And that's the befriending that you've talked about.
And if we're talking about, the resistance that's coming against what my deepest, truest, best self wants to do, it's hitting the resistance of coming through an outer self, which has been programmed and conditioned to maybe not do it or to let it slide. And the resistance we're feeling against becoming more truly, fully who we are. Mm-hmm. The resistance to bring more of our very best forward. Mm-hmm. And then there's the kind of resistance that's within the ego that wants to just maintain its control and do what it's doing, which may not be in the best service of ourselves, truly. So you mentioned the boundaries, and I was thinking how, in the front of our property, we have a fence. And the fence is there so when the snow is being plowed, it doesn't go over into the next neighbor's yard. Mm-hmm. And that boundary, that fence, has needed to be strong so that the snow would not go over. And over years, the boundary has weakened. And now when the snow is pressed, it goes right over and over to his side. And fortunately, I talked with him about it. He said, don't worry about it. We'll get the fence. But my point being that, boundaries need to have a certain resistance to hold us into a form or provide for us an infrastructure that gives our lives the balance that we're looking for. And the resistance we feel can sometimes be a marker. You're getting a little too, like a dog fence. You're getting a little too close. You're getting a little sensation here. And to make a choice, do I want to maintain that boundary there? Or do I want to move the boundary a little further out or a little further in? But the resistance to that might be, but I've always been here, I've always done it this way. It's screwed in right here, you're going to have to change the screws and blah, blah, blah. What part of you is making that decision? Is it the part of you that is really the fullness, the wholeness, the best of you continually wanting to come through? Or is it the outer self with its patterns and programs and conditionings? Or the ego, which is trying to maintain control no matter what happens in the world, it's going to keep doing the same thing? Or is it the better part of you that knows this is all working to be in some type of a dynamic balance with pressures and resistances?
I'd say jumping in from a somatic experience, a somatic perspective in the body. When you mentioned being the 6-year-old and putting the fists up, and I think we've all been at a place where maybe we haven't been able to admit it's a 6-year-old or an 8-year-old or whatever it is, but we've all had that moment where we close down. And we've talked, in other episodes about stress itself and what it can do, but it does shut us off, and the blinders kind of come down. The blinders are in place, and all we can really see is our immediate discomfort and how now at this point, what is that physical response that we're having when we start to move into that resistance or push toward the resistance? The heart rate sometimes can elevate. There's a tightness in the chest, and we literally have our reasoning and our wider perspective. It closes in on us. And so, how can we care for ourselves as we begin to lean into that and to know, okay, well, is the resistance itself, is this something that's serving me? Or because now my blinders are on, have I just limited myself and I'm missing my greater picture, the longer vision? How do we know that resistance is serving us or helping us? Is it getting in the way of us getting where we need to go or where we desire to go? And so that's the point at which where you felt that 6-year-old limiting, where we, again, have all been there, felt that 6-year-old limiting. And meanwhile, the 6-year-old doesn't know any better. And so now it's for us to practice. And that's where the practice comes, not during the time that we're in that state, but really focusing in on it before, preparing, just the way we exercise before we get into a competition, or some people prepare for races or other sorts of things. If we're in shape and if we're prepared, then when it happens, it's not so difficult.
And one of the purposes of our dialogues is that we look at these things and share experiences with these things, so that anyone listening, it might kind of resonate with something they have seen or have experienced. Because first we have to be aware, this is what's happening. There's a resistance happening here. There's a part of me that is trying to have its way, and a part of me that believes it should be a certain way, which is all part of the ego, part of the self-centeredness. This is all around me, as opposed to when we're more centered, and then we're life-centered. And what's happening in life right now? Well, there's this resistance coming up. There's this realization of something. I don't really want to take a look at that. I don't want to see it. Being self-aware, the unexamined life is not worth living. I mean, if you're not aware, then you're just going on automatic pilot and reacting and reliving 6-year-old, 10-year-old, 12-year-old, imposing what this is the way it is, as opposed to getting to that place within ourselves where we can enter into situations ready to handle more of what comes forth. As I've often mentioned, a practice I do is imagining I'm in this lifelong improvisational play, and I'm walking into situations when I'm at my best and I'm most clear and most centered. I'm walking into situations with an openness as to, what's here? And how can I serve in some good way in this situation, in this moment? But we all have blind spots. We all have parts of us that have yet to come into our awareness. And we may not want those to come into awareness, but it's part of what we need to be working with, and to not resist. What is the reality here? And how can I respond to this? And ultimately, the best response is one where I've befriended it. And now this is like a good friend who is maybe a little misguided or a little bit rigid, and I need to help transform, shift the form, evolve, grow that part of myself, meaning that outer part of myself, so that it becomes more out of the way of the inner part of inner self. And maybe as time goes on, more and more a clearer reflection, or a better word, expression of, an expression of the inner self, which I believe within everyone is a wise, strong, clear, loving, compassionate, caring, nurturing, patient, joyful, good self. And so the center for optimum living is the center, is the position of being from that good place inside, against all the pressures and resistances that life brings, external and ones in our own brains.
And remembering that we are, that these things that rise up within us are not our enemy. That's I think to the point of resistance when we think of that word. That, how can we, as you said at the beginning, befriend this and to regard it as a useful gift rather than a limitation or something that we really do immediately, as we've all been there, forgetting an appointment or something happens, that we kick ourselves. We tend to move toward that because it's how we've been trained. And so it is a little strange in the beginning to practice softening your approach. It feels strange. Speaking of somatic experiences, it feels a little odd to be able to just turn down and take a breath or two, and just imagine yourself talking softly to it. The key to that is to remember that softening it doesn't mean weakening it. No, because what you move to, what we move to, is a place that's even of greater strength. It's a very graceful strength. It's a kind of strength that sometimes isn't even being noticed, but it is having a good influence on the situation. And certainly in the West, we are trained to, you go at it and you go at it hard and you destroy it. And there may be times and places when you have no choice but to do that. But for the most part in our lives, to be able to welcome, literally behold,
not just perceive or be aware, but behold it. It's a gift. That my system, my body, my mind, something is telling me here that there's a resistance. There's something going on here. Let me be aware of what's going on. Is this just my ego conditioning wanting to maintain itself? Or is this something coming up from within me that wants to come through? I think about pandemic fatigue right now, that so many people they're just tired of the restrictions. And for some, they're ignoring the restrictions. I mean, I've even heard some people say, you know what, I've had enough of this. I can't do this anymore, right? I mean, and others, I'm so confused. They say, this is okay, that's not okay, this is safe, this is not. Very confusing time. And what can each of us do to get clearer, to be able to say, okay, let me just be in a place of open clarity, not the rigidity of ego that wants to just do what I used to do or keep doing what I want to do, but to go to a place of deeper awareness and wisdom, which looks at a big overview. If I were 100% able to be responsible for the whole world, what would I want the whole world to do right now? What would I want the whole world to do? There's some saying that this can go on for many years now, if people do not begin to do what needs to be in everyone's best interest. And other ones who are saying, this is just a little cold, there's no really problem going on here. So how do we come using our own best, not judgment, but our own best wisdom, coming from a place that's not the ego that wants to just do things as it wants to, self-centered, but a deeper place of being life-centered, world-centered, life-centered. It's the best word to use for it. And say, okay, therefore, what do I feel could be of good here? Let's err on the side of caution. But we have resistances to do anything other than what we're programmed and used to doing, or what everyone around us is doing. The collective consciousness, the consensus reality, as it's been called.
And does anyone who's at the very beginning of this concept of even leaning into resistance, no matter what form it takes, where do they even begin? I mean, the idea for a lot of people of even looking down at that tightness in their chest can be really intense. It can be really intimidating for some people. Other people say, what do I need? And they just kind of, keep going. But for the ones that are really questioning and feeling a connection with this conversation, where do you begin? Mm-hmm. And that is where, this is the beginning of a lifelong practice
of being present,
of being present. Exactly.
My throat is tightening, my head, my toes are tight. This is your reality right now. Mm-hmm. And Lori, I know in your work with Reiki, that often it's being done just on that most, the broadest possible way in terms of where are the restrictions, where are the tensions, what is being withheld here, what needs to have some life breathed into it.
And many people don't even recognize that they're holding their shoulders around their ears. And I caught an article, I think it was in the paper last week, it's all over, about people having their teeth cracking now. The dentists are seeing it more than ever because we don't recognize how we're just trying to muscle our way through the day. And, we've talked about schedules in the past, how it's not easy to plan things out weeks in advance any longer. We're lucky. We don't know what's going to happen in the next hour these days. Right. And so, no wonder the jaw is clenched. Right. And so where do we begin? While we cannot control the things on the outside, turning, inward and being able to, first of all, creating that space so that you can turn inward, because oftentimes the first thing so many people do these days is they want to catch the news. They want to check in with it. They want to get, and the list continues on until the whole day has gone and you haven't even taken any time to just sit and listen to the body. And that's the practice that no matter what form it is, whether it's on a bike trail, whether it's, just having a quiet moment, reading a book, whatever it is, becoming aware of what does being present mean, becoming aware of what's just going on in your body and you're in your immediate area and nothing beyond that. And
what's going on right here, right now.
Yeah.
And then I'm holding my breath and I'm clenching my teeth and
Yeah.
I'm being annoyed or I'm being
Yeah.
scared or I'm, all this information coming. Okay, that's the stuff coming. How do we respond? Well, first of all, get to the place where you can respond and not just react.
And the opposite of resistance, which is acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to say, even though these things are going on, I am choosing to loosen my jaw.
Right.
Even though these things, yes, these things are happening,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm choosing to just look at my breath, just to watch it for a little while. Yes, there's a tightness in my chest, and it goes on and on.
Mm-hmm.
And just practicing that little tiny, in whatever way you want,
Right.
just allowing yourself to get a break, because we are experiencing exhaustion right now. This is, how long are we supposed to keep waiting for what? I don't know how many shoes have dropped, but we've had a lot of shoes. I don't even count for, I don't even look for them anymore, because we know.
Accepting that. Shoes are dropping. We don't know what's coming next or where.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do I put myself like a juggler in the best position of balance so I can deal with whatever's happening?
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes it's not even juggling. It's sometimes you just have to let it hit the ground.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
just, okay, there it is on the, all right, it's on the floor.
Right.
I'm choosing to breathe.
Yeah, that's the best I can do right now. But if you're locked up in ego, which is resisting whatever's going on and it's not supposed to and it shouldn't be, that's not fair, then there's not going to be the same overview that a more centered view, which is wisdom, a bigger, wider view of the whole picture. Wow, we're all going through this right now and experiencing it in very different levels. Mm-hmm. And we all have our own personal lives with our own goals and dreams and hopes and our own habits and conditionings, some of which we are aware or not aware. But in accepting all of this, how can I come to, first of all, in being aware of this and being aware of it, okay, I see what I'm dealing with, and now receive it as a gift. This is my life. This is my life. This is where I'm living, how I'm living, what's going on, the challenges and the opportunities. This is the mix of factors that make for my life story at this point. How can I respond to it now? I'm aware of it and I accept it. And now I'm going to co-author my story, my journey, by being of good influence when and where I can to the fullest extent that I can. Mm. And as Jorge ended our last talk saying, don't be too hard on yourself. You're going to drop a ball now and then. You're going to, but it's part of our learning process. If we say, why did the ball drop? Why did this thing happen? What can I do to offset it from happening next time? And that is how we learn and grow, because we are learning to be more responsible for ourselves. I am becoming more responsible for my outer self, which is going both on what I wanted to do and things that have been programmed into it that it's not even aware of, that it's kind of going along doing. Mm-hmm. So becoming more self-aware in the present and responding to those dynamics.
And just in leaning into resistance again, what will we find when we do? And sometimes it is just that need for a quiet space to give ourselves time to think and to recover before we can even consider the next move. And sometimes even before we have a sense of what the next move is, that maybe there's some grieving that needs to be done. Maybe there's some sadness. Maybe there's some fear that, when is this going to stop? I mean, there's a lot of change, a lot of leaving things that we thought we understood to be permanent. I referred a few weeks ago to this raft, and the raft is still moving down the river. And so the things that have fallen away, it's an opportunity for something new and beautiful to come up. I was talking with a dear friend about the forest fires, and if you let yourself think about it, it's more challenging, I think, in so many ways, especially with this pandemic on top of everything else. But underneath all of this, in spite of the trauma, in spite of the tragedy, there's hope that those little trees, have all made acorns. They've all made seeds, and this is an opportunity for something new to grow. And resistance, if we spend our time fighting that resistance, fighting and fighting, we will stay locked in fighting. But if we move into a space of acceptance and practicing that befriending, with an acceptance, that's when we have that opportunity. If I keep if I keep my fist around that acorn, it's never going to grow. But if I have the courage to soften my own grip, my own hand, and place it in the ground and tend to it, the forest comes back, and it can be more beautiful and more healthy than ever before. The death is a part of life. Change is inevitable. And so resistance, what are we doing? We're avoiding change. So where do you want? Do you want to be caught up in the change happening to you, or do you want to be a part of making the change? And that's where I just like to leave everyone tonight.
Well, I never like to leave everyone.
Well, I don't want to leave everyone.
And life is an ongoing process. The change is the only constant. And for us to continually do whatever we can to strengthen ourselves, strengthen our spirit, so we have the faith that overcomes the fear, that we have the courage that enables us to move through scary times, that we have the community of others who are getting us and understanding us and being fueled by us and fueling us, the true connection, community, communion of people being together, especially now at this time of incredible division and separation, to still reach underneath those differences to find that common core, knowing we are all in this together. We are all facing resistances. We're all facing procrastination habits. This is our human condition, but it is the spirit within that human condition which can bring us forth into a better condition. So be careful, be healthy, assess the things you're resistant to, take a look at them and see what you can do. If it's a message from your life to do something, what can you do to enable your body, mind, emotions, and the people, places, things with whom you're tethered, the ones within your reach, to lift up and rise up and not be pressed down or blocked off by the accepted, as if those resistances, the serenity prayer, to change the things you can't, accept the things you can't, and the wisdom to distinguish one from the other. And the flexibility to know that it might all change tomorrow. What you couldn't accept or you couldn't change, now you can change. And to be able to give your life that fluidity, not randomness, but that held loosely structure that that enable us to get through to where we want to go. So be well. Thank you for being with us. And thank you, everyone, for being with us as well. Take care.
Thank you, everyone. Be well.